Now we've done the circle with scales, we've gone through fifths, we've learned the interval of the fifth and the importance of it, and the number 7 pertaining to perfection or completion. And this is why that is such a great number to think about in relation to God, and the fact that this comes from God and He's revealing it to us. He's revealed it to everyone, and we can do what we want with that revelation. So we're going to be creating and using this to understand theory and some of the basics that slip away if we're not paying attention, and also to emphasize staying simple, because there's so much beauty in these small things, and everybody wants to improvise, but nobody knows how to get to that point where you can. This is how. It's by staying and patiently waiting with the smaller things or the basic things, because the bigger things get easier as you go. For example, you wouldn't have any issue now if I told you this was a major 7, because you can see it. Why? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7. Here's 1. So I'm calling this a major chord. So you don't even know the terminology yet. Let's just say you know nothing except what I've showed you so far. I can just tell you, okay, well, that's a major triad. Will you accept that? Hopefully you will. And then we're going to add 7. So if this is a major triad and that's 7, then this is a major 7. This is a C major 7. So you see, even if you didn't know the in-between part of how to form a major triad, you can start to understand something a little more involved by the little bit we've done in these basics. So that's a great example of why these are important and why it's important to take your time and go slow. You can work on the big things while you're working on these little things. It's nice to be working in both places or more than one area. So always back to basics, though. That's where all the beauty is discovered, and then you bring it forth your own way. If you don't know these basics, then you're limited to what everybody else tells you to do. If you know these, and you start to understand the way your particular instrument is made, then you can get the theory from anyone, but they're not going to tell you how to play. That's for you and God to work out. So that's why I like this approach, is I'm trying to free you to find who you are, not the way I play or the way I think that you should play. We're now going to look at the circle again from another angle, and that would be formation of key centers or key signatures. So we started with C, so we will. And when we talk about 7s, we're going to call this 7 naturals. There are no sharps, there are no flats. So we could say this is 0, or the beginning of the key centers or places to compose. But we also want to say specifically that there are 7 naturals. There's no sharps, no flats. Now, that doesn't mean white keys, because on a violin or a guitar, there are no white keys. But there are no sharps or flats in a C scale on a guitar or a violin or any woodwind. So it's not about the keys, white keys or black keys. It's about actual things that alter these intervals or change them. And this particular scale that we've developed with the 2 tetrachords is consistent 12 times, 11 other besides this. And in that, they are 7 notes formed the same way, the same distance. And in order to keep that consistent, then we have to add sharps as we ascend to get them there, or we won't have the same sound. And that's how these scales were born, or you could say how other keys were born. So if we look at this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1. This has a distinct sound. Now, if we just move up to G, well, it feels the same, almost looks the same, but it's not sounding the same. And the only way to get that to happen like it does here is to have the last part of the scale a half step. So there it is. That's the distinction. This is called the leading tone, because it leads you to 1. I often think of the leading tone as a Christian as like the note that Jesus contains or belongs to or owns, if you will, because this note is the most important note in the scale, because it leads you back to 1 or continually pulls you to 1. And that was the mission of Jesus. I'm leading you to the Father. The Father and I are 1. We go to the Father through Jesus. So that's theologically how I think of this in terms of music. It's just a little thing that I really look at, because you just don't hear it going anywhere else, and no one does. You don't hear this. You hear it going back to 1, and that's the leading tone. It's a half step away from 1. If we're going to do a G scale, you can build it with tetrachords, or you can find all your white keys here, and you can see clearly that a half step below the root up there is the leading tone. So we have now the key of C, 0 sharps and flats. The key of G has 1 sharp. Now we go to the key of D, and we formed this with the tetrachords, so you already can see where the scale is going to lay. And that leading tone is a half step away from 1. And it is no coincidence that it's 7 notes away from 1. So the complete number, the perfect number, the one that leads us to 1, this becomes a nice way for me to relate to God, to understand God, to be close to God when I'm composing or playing or thinking or creating, deciding what notes to use. This idea of tension and resolve, leading to 1, is something that's really beautiful, been around forever, but so has God. And he was there first before music, or before he gave it to us, I should say. So this is something I really like thinking and like sharing with people. So this 7th note, yet again, is our key note to getting back to 1. And now with D finished, we go with 2 sharps, because so there's something interesting right there in that we have 2 sharps now, and we had 1, and we started with none. So this is going to get pretty obvious as we go along. If we go to the key of A, and we just did D that had 2 sharps, and our next key a 5th away is A, then you know we're going to have 3 sharps. Now, we keep the sharps that we had. That's how we know what sharps to add to them if we build like this. So we had a C sharp in the last scale, so we definitely are keeping that. And we had an F sharp in the last scale, so we're keeping that. So then how do we get the last sharp? That's easy. It's the half step below. That's our leading tone. Now we go to E, and we're going to keep 3 sharps from A, and one of them was F sharp, one was G sharp, and then we go to A and B, and now we have C sharp. That was in the last one, so here's our new one. D sharp. The leading tone, the seventh note, is the one that always changes or factors as we go up. This is the one that makes us a new scale. Adding the seventh a half step away, adding the seventh note, in this way makes our major scale complete and makes this one unique from the other one. So that's what's going to happen when we go to B. We have 2 from the last one, 2 more from the key of E, and then our leading tone. And you can see it right there. That's the one that makes this a major scale. Okay, so now we're going to go from there to F sharp, and F sharp. We're keeping everything we had from B. We had these from before, and now we have a white key becoming a sharp. This is now called E sharp, and then F sharp. In later discussions or later theory books, wherever you might go, you'll get answers as to why that's going to be called E sharp and not F. But it's very clear in this layout why, because we're adding sharps. And remember, there are no white keys or black keys on other instruments. So to call this E sharp on a different instrument is less difficult for them to cope with than it is for pianists, because we look at that and say, wow, this is F, and that's E, and that's F sharp, but this is also E sharp. And for this purpose, it is. So we have 6 sharps, and we've added from the beginning having none. C had 0, G had 1, D had 2, A had 3, E had 4, B had 5, and now F sharp has 6. In order to keep that sound, we can't have that note, we have to have this note, and that is E sharp in the key of F sharp. The last one is C sharp, and so we go up with all sharps, keeping the ones we had. We keep our E sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and now the last on the piano, white E accidental or sharp, is B sharp. So now we have 7 sharps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. This is C sharp. 7 sharps. This is C major. 7 naturals. They're right next to each other in the end, but this has no sharps, no flats, or 7 naturals. This has 7 sharps. Every single note is sharped. C is sharp. D is sharp. E is sharp. F is sharp. G is sharp. A is sharp. B is sharp. And C is sharp. Leading tone to 1. So this is the formation of the sharp. There are 7 naturals to begin with, and there are a maximum amount of 7 sharps. There are no more sharps to be added. So this is where the circle of fifths stops. It doesn't end because a circle is a complete idea. It's a complete thing. It goes, of course, all the way around, and it can go either direction. It's infinite, another wonderful symbol of God. But in terms of theory and adding sharps and thinking in composing ascending, the keys stop adding sharps at C sharp. So we had the circle of fifths being C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, C sharp.